Well, my panelists this afternoon, as Debbie said, some of the most distinguished people in this country, some of the really wonderful women. I just get goosebumps when I think about some of the work that they've done, and I think really the theme for this discussion is about them, because they exude that power of love. So let me introduce them to you. Josie Adler, her commitment to building strong civil society was founded in her family's background as immigrants and refugees. And one of the things that she's done is she founded the Ekhaya Neighborhood City Improvement Districts, and it's an association of property owners and housing managers that are reclaiming the streets and buildings of Hillbrow one step at a time. Josie walks the streets of Hillbrow, I tell you, and nothing happens to her because she's done that work. And she calls herself a professional organizer, and she's been doing that for over 2 decades. Next to her is Tali Nates, and Tali is a director of the Johannesburg Holocaust and Genocide Center, and she's lectured internationally about Holocaust education, genocide prevention, reconciliation, and human rights. And Nobulali Dangazele is a Mandela Rhodes Scholar. She has an MA in Dramatic Arts that she obtained under that particular program, and she founded Nobulali Productions. And one of the things that they do is to make Shakespeare and books that are prescribed by the Department of Education and the Independent Examinations Board easy to understand. I wish I had you around when I was in high school. Thank you so much to all three of you for your time this afternoon. All right, I'm going to start with you, Josie, and if you can grab that microphone over there. It was interesting, one of the things that was said, I think it's on. When I walked in when Dr. Elizabeth Medebold was on, and one of the things that struck me about what she said was that with feminism, one of the things that we've done is we've trivialized choice. And that struck me, because then I thought differently about this panel discussion, because then it makes me feel that what all three of you embody and what you do is to honor the choices that we have now, that women of many other generations didn't have. What do you think about that?
Ziki, I want to say what a pleasure it is to not phone into you and to sit next to you. That's a wonderful pleasure for me. And just to see everybody here and wish that I had time to make your acquaintance, because I'm a very inquisitive person. And that's what motivates me in my choices. And if I can just briefly say, I was 16 when the first state of emergency happened. And I was conscious of a South Africa that was pushing me in and preventing me from going where I wanted to go. And then came the new South Africa. You know, from 16 till 1994, I think I fought quite hard to hold my space, yeah, and not be told where I couldn't go. And with the change in the new South Africa, it's been as hard again, because it's almost as if the new South Africa is trying to push you back into spaces. And when in the last 7 years that I've been working in Hillbrow, somebody said to me one day, "Gogo, are you lost?" And I looked at this young man, and I said, "That's kind of you to ask, but do you see this building over there? It's the Florence. I don't know if any of you know the Florence. It was a maternity home, and now it's a very badly criminalized, hijacked building." Yeah. I said, "You see that building over there? I was born there. Wow. I've been here all the time." And I think relative to your question about choice, there's something in that about owning your space, about taking your space. And if I may just, my thoughts about love and power, I was talking with a young woman sitting next to me while earlier, and we were talking about the speaker, Dr. That lady, and we were talking about the getting promoted. And I was remembering so vividly from my community organizing training that power is taken, not given.
Yeah.
And choice is exercised.
Yeah.
Options are not given you.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, organizing is a profession. It's not a profession that's known in South Africa, and that may be me and my teacher's fault. I don't know if any of you know Ishmael Mkabela. Do you know Ishmael? Maybe you know Bongi through the Children's Fund.
Yes.
Ishmael called me and said, come and do organizing with him. And I worked with him for 20 years. And it's a profession that emanates from Chicago, from Saul Alinsky. And I wanted to say that central to the organizing, broad-based relational organizing, is an understanding of and a methodology for arranging the cooperative management of self-interest. Now, thinking about the power and love theme, I wanted to say from my organizing work, it occurred to me when I was coming here, it flows that I see and understand love as constituting the respectful arranging of relationships around power.
Yeah, and I'm going to pick up on that a little bit later, but let me just bring Tali into our conversation and just staying with choice and exercising that choice. It's very easy to see things happen around you and do nothing about it, but complain to others and think it's somebody else's problem. What do you think prompts action?
First of all, about choices. First of all, I think that if we had the privilege of having two souls, we could dedicate one to hate and one to love. But we don't. We have one soul. So it's our choice. It's my choice. It's the caller's choice that phone you to decide what do they want to dedicate their soul to. And if it is hate, it's very sad. We have one life. So dedicate it to love, dedicate it to care, and then to continue. So in my line of work, genocide, mass killing, where you see whole nations being slaughtered, when you meet survivors that are for years later trying to struggle with the memories of what other human beings did to them. It wasn't aliens from out of space, it's human beings.
It was human beings. Some of them neighbors, some of them,
absolutely,
you know, teachers, friends,
family,
people, and family members.
Sometimes, in the case of Rwanda. So it is the choice, what Elizabeth spoke about before and what Josie spoke about before, the choice is really in our hand. And the choice is between being a perpetrator or being a bystander. Most of society, most of us, we are bystanders every day. I am a bystander every day. You can't be an activist all the time, even Josie. And Josie is very, very active. But we can't be active all the time. Yeah. But the thing is to choose to be active as much as you can. Yeah. Choose to make a difference in someone's life, in the world that you care about. So your world, you have to decide what is your world, and then you act. And I'll tell you a little story, very little, to end this. Because I deal with so many people that suffered so much, a lot of what I learn and what I care about comes from stories. So in Pretoria, there was a Dutch gentleman that died last year. He was 87 years old, Jaap van Proestig. And Jaap lived in the Netherlands during the Second World War. As a lawyer, he saved the lives of more than 150 Jewish men, women, and children from the Nazis. He was 21 years old. Okay, 150 people. How did he save them? He forged papers, and he declared that they were Christians, and he invented even a stamp to say that you're Christian, so the Nazis will not accept any other certificate, only with the forged stamp of Jaap. Okay? That is courage, that is action, that is activism. I asked Jaap many years ago, why did you do it? Why did you do it? And he looked at me as if I'm absolutely crazy. And he said, what do you mean? If you will see a person drowning, wouldn't you jump and save that person? I had to do it. You know, I kept quiet. I didn't want to tell him that I am not a good swimmer. that I am not going to jump to save you, Lolly. But I will call you, Siki, and I'll say, you
come
will
jump in."
do it. Or help, someone do it, okay? Now, I'm telling it in a funny way, but the fact is, we have to move ourselves to make a difference not only in our personal life, but in society, in community, in our,
And around
in
us.
our circle.
And when I open it to the floor, this is a question I want you to think about, and maybe we can talk a little bit about that as well, is what motivates you to action? Is it somebody in distress? Is it because of an experience you've gone through in the past that when you see someone going through the same thing, you are prompted to act? What prompts you not to act? It reminds me of what you were saying about that saying, and I can't remember off the top of my head who said it, that evil prevails when good men do nothing. So I want to know what prompts you into action, but we'll do that in a moment. I was looking at the tweets because I only got here sort of mid-afternoon, and an earlier one from Puti Mahanyelo, who was speaking a little bit earlier, CEO of Shanduka, saying that women are starting businesses at twice the rate of men. And one thing that I found looking at some of the statistics on entrepreneurship is that many of those are social enterprises. Now, Lali, you could have gone off and started your own business doing anything other than what you were doing right now. So what prompted you in this direction?
Firstly, I'm an actor by profession. So I've acted for about 7 years in the industry, and I really enjoyed that. But when I was doing my studies and you realize that there's something about being a consumer of knowledge, and there's something inspiring about being a creator of knowledge. Now, for people that have gone through varsity, you know how painful it is to write that dissertation or that essay. But the reward at the end of the day, to have something that sits in a library at an institution of higher learning that has your name on it, for me was a great honor. So having the acting background, I saw how a lot of young people look up to us as actors, and they think we literally don't use the toilet, they think we are greater than God, and they ask us sometimes, are you rich and famous? And my problem became answering that question, that yes, I am famous, but the rich part I'm not. And a lot of South African actors go through the cycle of wealth and complete broke states, and then wealth again, but the fame is constant. And some of them choose to live up to this persona that is personified as this famous actor or actress, and others completely become recluse. Now, I had a choice when I completed my studies, when my mom was watching the SAFTAs and asked me, isn't it interesting how majority of the awards for the actors are all taken by the young, black, up-and-coming actors, but the producing awards are all taken by the older generation? What is it that you want to, which space do you want to belong in? And I thought to myself, you know, for many generations, our parents were consumers of knowledge, consumers of products given to us. And Africa is a continent, we are usually the consumers. But when will we shift from being consumers to becoming creators, not only of our own wealth, but our own destiny? And this for me is what made me realize that, you know what, yes, I am an actor, and there are a lot of connotations attached to that about being the poor actor, the starving artist. You need to be dirty and have dreadlocks and speak in funny languages to be accepted. But I thought there's a clean, pristine version of an actor or an artist that I would like to present to young people. One that says, you know what, I'm a creator of my own knowledge, I'm a creator of my own wealth, and lastly, I'm a creator of my own destiny. And this is what it is that led to me wanting to start the business. But also, what do we all do? I mean, we all have cell phones. All of our cell phones have ringtones, meaning that at some point in time, you acknowledge an artist that composed that music when you respond to the cell phone that calls you. Now, why then do I want to go and disregard the role that artists play in the lives of so many on a daily basis by limiting myself to just being a performer? And hence, I wanted to become an entrepreneur, an artist that engages in entrepreneurial activities.
But there is obviously the social angle to it as well, where you are taking what is a very difficult subject matter, or one that's very difficult for certain teachers to teach, for example, and you're saying we are going to get into this space. And I speak about this because for me, there's the biggest tragedy is this lack of a reading culture among young people. I can't cope with it. I shout at my Facebook friends, I shout at my listeners when they SMS and they use that text language. I'm like, well, I'm not going to read it if you can't spell. Start by spelling, read it back, check your grammar, and then press send, because this is costing you R2. And I'm not going to decipher it for you. Okay. I do get a bit cheeky sometimes. So for me, I think that's where a big part of some of the work that you do is so important.
Well, I wrote an article in Transform SA, and the title was "To BBM or Not to BBM." Why hold it against our children that they write in text as long as they're writing and reading? I'm sorry. I see daggers coming towards me. But you know what? I really, really advocate for meeting people where they are. If I SMS using text language, meet me where I am. The greatest thing about my mom, who passed away last month, unfortunately, is she used to WhatsApp me, and I was like, Mom, you are gangster. And I put it on Facebook that my mom freaking WhatsApps. And all my friends were like, she is gangster, she is dope, she is on point. Now, when she WhatsApped, she'd usually be engaging me robustly on matters that engage the manner in which I am behaving as a youth of South Africa. But because she's on WhatsApp, I'm like, hey, I'll listen. You can shout, you can rant and rave, and I will change my behavior because you are meeting me where I am. Now, Shakespeare is snee pap and vlei snee. We all know this. But there is such great beauty in using prose and verse, and iambic pentameter and antithesis. And when we say to learners, you can write to me however you want, as long as you're writing in Victorian language, you should see these learners go crazy. And there's these learners in Limpopo who call themselves the Willie Shakers. Because, and I tried to explain why we can't open a Facebook page for them, but they went and did it themselves. But the Willie Shakers are based in rural Limpopo, and all they do is speak to each other in Elizabethan language when Shakespearean is around. These are grade 8s all the way up to grade 12s. This is a school that should, according to all rules and regulations, not even know who Shakespeare is. But they command the verse in such an amazing way. We had, yes, that does deserve a clap. We had a lady called Tracy Irish from the Royal Shakespeare Company coming and looking at what we're doing in various parts of South Africa with Shakespeare. And she went and saw the Willie Shakers. And they were wearing stockings, okay? And they stuffed the stockings with blazers on the side so that they've got those tights that men used to wear in those days. And they spent 7 days. 7 days. These kids are in grade 8. They spent 7 days. They learned the entire Romeo and Juliet and not reiterated, they performed the entire play for Tracy. And for me, it was, you know what, we got to them using the texting, we got to them using the Facebook, but then they responded because we were doing something primarily important, which is meeting them where they are. So I think
There's a black and white. The one thing I will agree with you on, though, is people make fun of the Daily Sun. That newspaper has the highest circulation, and it's gotten people reading. So I don't care if they're reading about Tokoloshes, as long as they are reading. So
I saw a headline today. I saw a headline for Daily Sun. It says, Mavis finally dies. I was like, who is Mavis? And why is it so great that she's dead? But I'm like, I need to get that, you know? So they're meeting people where they are.
I saw that headline and I thought, who on earth is Mavis? Am I going to look stupid? But I want to come back again and talk about community, because really, I must say something. Jersey, I live in Killarney, right? Literally right by the wilds. And I can't tell you the last time I went past the wilds towards Hillbrow, that part of the world scares me. 7 years ago, what prompted you?
You're saying such important things about taking people where they are. And I would have liked now to tell you about, and you talked about social entrepreneurship, and I would like to have told you about rural women in Driefontein. I don't know if you remember where Salem Keys came from, but we'll talk about Hillbrow and taking people where they are. As an organizer, you're interested in people's self-interest, what their issues are. You're not coming in with a program and funding and what you think they need or what they will have told you that they need in conversation, and everybody needs everything. But judicious listening. Now, Hillbrow, as you know, went through a 30-year downslide and total breakdown of all relationships. Relationships between landlords and tenants, between tenants and each other, between landlords and the city, and a very dangerous and foul place. At the same time, a lot of people were in formal jobs and looking for accommodation, and there developed a very strong demand for housing. So private property owners and social housing companies started investing. And I happened to say to my brother-in-law who established the Johannesburg Housing Company, I'm not his mother. Everybody says, are you Taffy's mother? I'm not Taffy Adler's mother. And I said to him, I don't think your business is going to work in this social housing company because you're doing with government money at no risk for no profit, the same as private sector is doing with its money at risk for profit. And nobody's going to stay because you're going to have one building under management here and another one there, and people can't get from their taxi to the front door. And people are worried that their kids can't get up the stairs in the building where there's no lift, and they're climbing up the outside on the fire escape, and you're at work. All that's happened is an increase in stress. Taffy said, well, what does one do in those circumstances? And I said, I think one tries to make a neighborhood. And he said to me, does Ish know what you do? So I kept quiet. 4 years later, Taffy said to me, did I want to try? I said, try what? And he said, about the neighborhood. I said, of course, I want to see if organizing can work. But I need leaders. Organizers can't work without leaders. An organizer is like a spoon, a powerful spoon. You can use it to dig concrete. You can use it to stir your tea. You've got to be careful what you use a spoon for. But if you've got leaders who know how to use that spoon, we can see what we can do. So Johannesburg Housing Company found Trafalgar Properties, and I set about going in the streets and going into, at that stage, 33 buildings to try to find the owners. And there they were sitting miserably. One man showed me a file this thick. He says, I've been writing to the city for 9 years. They must come and clean this place up. It's foul. It smells. I don't know if any of you know how it was. And gunshots 24/7. Everybody just thought it was fun to shoot a gun. I said, if I find 3 or 5 other people like you, will you come to a meeting? Well, 26 people came. And we formed a steering committee, and we started acting one by one on the issues. And then I said to the property owners, can I work with your caretakers and housing supervisors? And they, oh, are you going to opstook with the tenants? And I said, no, I'm not going to work with the tenants. I'm working with leaders. I'm working with you. But I'd like to work with your caretakers and housing supervisors. Anyway, this process started, carried on over the years, and we acted one by one on the issues. The first issue was the New Year violence in Hillbrow. Do any of you live in Hillbrow? No. You know about the New Year violence.
Yeah, when they throw stuff, when they throw fridges and TVs and stuff out
from Crystal and Volkswagen Combi engines onto the roof of the church, which has been there over 112 years. It's having its celebrations, the Lutheran church now. 80,000 rand, 100,000 rand damage every year. I say to people, Mama, we're no yapi. You know, who's showing you to do these things? Where's your mother? I mean, hey, because that's what it's about.
Yeah.
How can you take leave of your senses and the rest of us all come to look what's happening? Because it's such
And do
fun.
nothing about it.
To
Ooh,
see
this is
people
fun.
throwing tires off balconies onto the police cars.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. So that was the housing supervisors issue. Well, may I tell you what happened? We did a campaign. This was a campaign with 33 A3 posters.
Yeah.
There was no money. And it said, Ikaya neighborhood, there'd been one meeting, wishes everybody a happy new year celebrated with respect for each other and the environment. And the second sentence said, we appreciate the efforts of the authorities to maintain zero tolerance of bad behavior. And then it listed the name of the 26 buildings that had come to the first meeting. When I went on the 1st of January, the caretaker said to me, there's never been such a quiet new year, not for 7 years. There was one shot out of a hijacked building called Vanencourt, went into Sunnycrest, and a rock came out of hijacked Koch mansions, went into Constantine. That was it. No glass, nothing. Now, what is this telling us?
Yeah.
It's telling us that people are looking for legitimated leadership, that when we all agree to do something, we've got a choice. You join in, or you move out and take the consequences. And people must assume that responsibility. Ye moch en ye moenie is finished. But so is freedom without responsibility.
Absolutely.
And this carried on and has carried on with the lanes. The property owners took responsibility, and gradually, it's now, I don't know which part of Hillbrow you're in, but it's the area from Esselen down to Smith. It has grown, 60 to 70 buildings, from the old hospital to BG Alexander. And everybody says, what's happening in that neighborhood? Property owners are painting their buildings.
It's become a neighborhood.
And I say they're feeling better. Where do you live, may I ask? You know it. Well, this morning I said to my husband, I'm thinking of moving to Hillbrow because my neighbors in Parkhurst behave so badly.
And before we open it to the floor, Terry, let me bring you back in, and just sticking with this issue of communities that have broken down and are now building themselves up. That must be especially hard in situations where neighbor went after neighbor and father went after, his brother and that sort of thing.
Absolutely, and I think that we have to also look at ourselves, at South Africa. Thank God, we never went into that route of genocide. Please remember that in April 1994, when we were voting, and how many of us were voting then, I'm not sure of those of you of that generation that voted in that first election in April 1994, 3.5 hours away, just take a flight from OR Tambo now, every day, in Kigali, Rwanda, the same month, the same year, April 1994, started a genocide that took the lives of over 800,000 Tutsis and moderate Hutus in 100 days, 3 months. Okay? So, first of all, we in South Africa did not pay attention much to what was going on. We were celebrating. The media of the world was here, covering the good story. Okay, so I just want to do a little bit of calculation because we had our painful past, and a society very close by in the same continent had a very painful past. Not comparing suffering. Suffering is suffering. We're going through our issues. We have our choices and our things to deal with. But how do you get out of that? How do we do it? And sometimes we're very happy about what we do it, and you're giving good stories, but you're also alluding to difficult stories and difficult choices that our nation is taking. How does a nation where 800,000 were murdered, and let me just give you a little bit because maybe you don't know the story, where in jail after the genocide, you had over 750,000 accused of genocide, okay, in a nation of 8 million people. So 10% killed, 10% is in jail. How do you actually do it? So what do? You talk. You actually communicate. And we spoke about communication quite a lot today. And it sounds really simple. It's not simple. It's not simple at all. But you start by talking to each other in all sorts of ways. And it's not easy. I can tell you that people are struggling even in our country to speak to each other about the past. Without judgment, without accusing, but just talking and listening to each other. And I have lots of stories, and maybe I'll share just a very, very quick story that I shared with you two that really kept me and gave me a lot of hope. I'm what is called the second generation. So my father was a Holocaust survivor. So sometimes I share that story. I was in Rwanda, actually with a group of actors. I had the opportunity to go with the play Truth in Translation. It was about our experience in South Africa of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, the TRC, and how the interpreters of the TRC had to tell the story in all languages. With great actors, with music by Hugh Masekela, with amazing actors. And I was facilitating conversations. And through that, I was telling some of my father's story and how me, as a child of a survivor that lost all his family, he was the only survivor with a brother, he lost his mother, he lost his sisters, he lost all his family. How do we as a family coped with what happened? The next day, a young woman runs to me, hugs me, starts crying and says, "Thank you, thank you, thank you." I did not know what she was talking about. And she said, "You know, you told your story. I'm a survivor. I never spoke for 14 years. For 14 years, I did not mention my story. But then I heard you yesterday, and you actually told your family story." And I looked and I thought, wow, she's talking. She is actually sharing. And she's okay. And I decided to tell my story. And this morning, for the first time, I shared my story with a group in a school. And I am liberated. I feel so strong. And she said words that I'll never forget. She said, "I never spoke for 14 years because speaking was weakness. Speaking was being vulnerable. Because don't forget, many women were raped in Rwanda, and there were many, many, many very difficult stories about speaking about your story." She said, "But I saw you, and you spoke about your family, you spoke about your murdered aunts, and you spoke about your murdered grandmother, and you looked like a strong woman." And I decided that speaking is strength. And I started to speak. So to answer by that story, communicating, speaking, really speaking to each other. That is the only way. There is no shortcuts. There is no shortcuts. We have to see each other as human beings. We have to hold hands almost with the killer. I'm afraid to say it, but that's what they do in Rwanda. They have unity councils where killers killers with survivors, with wives of killers are sitting together and talking. And lastly, this process is finishing actually now in June. It's part of the process is called the gachacha, that is sitting on the ground and speaking and telling in front of a sort of court of your peers, and that is finishing in June now, 18th of June this year. And this is the only process that could create some kind of a way to live with each other. Neighbor next to neighbor, families together.
And as you say, there's no shortcuts, eh? No shortcuts. Any questions?